Hello, welcome to another edition of What the Papers Are Saying. My name is Vivian Kai Loco. What the Papers Are Saying basically brings you the top stories for the week. I'll take a quick break. When I come back, I'll tell you some of the big stories that made headlines this week. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. So this week we saw the vetting of some ministers the president had nominated to appear before Parliament to be vetted and subsequently approved if that was supposed to be the case. But hours before the vetting started, the NDC released a statement to its members in Parliament. We also saw the minority holding a press conference subsequently on that vetting. The vetting did come on, the minority did attend, and then we'll look at the matters arising from that vetting, including how the nominees were treated by the minority, the answers they gave to some of the questions, among others. So that made a lot of headlines this week. This week, we also saw the NDC open its nominations. As we speak, the former President Mahama has picked up his form for his nomination. We have former Finance Minister Dr. Dufour picking his as well, and then Kojo Bonso picking his as well, and then a fourth person. So that made headlines as well. And then the very sad development we're seeing in the health sector, where vaccines are currently in shortage across the country, also has made some headlines across major news outlets in the country. So let me run you through how the main newspapers, the online side, as well as radio and TV, reported these stories as they trickled in. Let's start with the vetting of the ministerial nominees and start with the Daily Graphic. Let's see how they looked at the story. We start with Katie Hammond. The Daily Graphic captures the story this way. Katie Hammond supports cuts in imports. That's the Daily Graphic, one of its angles to that story. We go to the Chronicle, where they captured one of the stories around the vetting this week, specifically to do with the Agric Minister. Brian Echampon tells Appointment Committee, "I knew nothing about Ayawaso violence." Still with the Chronicle, they captured another story around the vetting this way. Obi Amwa, "Sorry Atu, I won't reject my nomination." Let's move to the Ghanaian Times. Drill ship saga. "I did nothing wrong." Katie Hammond rebuffs allegations, says he saved state money. The Chronicle again says, "Reduce ministers from 86 to 65. Minority tells Akufo-Addo, but Afenyo-Markin calls out opposition." Back to the GNPC drill ship, still with the Chronicle, it says, "Katie grilled over sale of GNPC drill ship." The Daily Analyst says, "Don't approve new ministerial nominees. NDC issues directives to minority caucus." The New Publisher, official order. NDC stops KT Brian approvals. The Custodian says, 6 new regions good for Ghana's growth. OB Amwa. Still with the Custodian, they say, "I deserve national award." This is KT Hammond speaking. The Ghanaian Publisher says, Obiamo defends new regions, clarifies CRA involvement in property rate collection. We go to the Republic Press. They say, "Brian weeps for Ayawaso victims, begs to see injured boys as he asserts innocence." Let's come to City Newsroom. Let's see how that website has been reporting the stories around the ministerial vetting. The first one says, "Minority position on vetting politically immature." Afenyo-Markin speaking. Still with the City Newsroom, majority begs minority to approve Akufo-Addo's new ministers. And then City Newsroom again, Atu, Brian Echampon exclaims after intense grilling by minority leader. And finally, with the City Newsroom and the vetting, Ayawaso West Walk on by-election, "I did not authorize security deployment." Brian Echampon speaking there. So those are the top news outlets and how they capture the story around the vetting of the ministerial nominees. Let's go to another story still making news today. That's to do with the NDC opening its nominations. Let's start with the Daily Graphic. It says Mahama picks NDC nomination forms. The City Newsroom says GNMA General Secretary to contest NDC parliamentary election in Lambusi. The Chronicle says Mahama targets Jubilee House again. Daily Guide says Mahama picks form to lead NDC in 2024. While the New Publisher says Mahama officially confirms I shall run, win in 2024. That's the publisher. City Newsroom says NDC Ashanti Regional Women's Organizer picks nomination forms for Dufour. So that happened this morning at the NDC's headquarters. City Newsroom again, NDC primaries calls for Mahama to go unopposed, not far-fetched. This is Kwachi Ofosu speaking there. Still with the City Newsroom, it says lawyer Baba Siddiq declares intention to contest Damango seat for NDC. Let's wrap up with the City Newsroom and also issues around with the nominations, vetting, rather the nominations to pick up forms. And it says NDC parliamentary nominations placed on hold in 4 more constituencies. Let's wrap up with the third topic that has gotten a lot of attention this week on the airwaves and on newspapers, among others, to do with the shortage of vaccines. We start with a Daily Graphic. They say routine child immunization, vaccine shortage hits health facilities. City Newsroom says Parliament summons health minister, other agencies over vaccine shortages. And then City Newsroom again, vaccine shortage due to CD depreciation. This is the Ghana Health Service speaking over there. And then finally on the vaccines and from the City Newsroom, Northern region, some mothers appeal for measles vaccines amidst outbreak. So those are the top stories for the week, and one to do with the vetting of the ministers, the second to do with the NDC opening nominations, and the third to do with shortage of vaccines. As usual, I have 2 gentlemen here to help me look at the stories, different angles, and what we may see moving forward around these stories based on the developments. First, I have with me Richard Sky. He's with City FM and City TV on the breakfast show on radio as well. Sky, welcome.
Thank you, Vivian. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Good.
And then I have with me, actually I have 2 lawyers tonight. I have with me Selom Adonu. He's also here with us at City FM and City TV. He's also on Eyewitness News on radio at 5:30 every Friday, I believe, and on The Big Issue every Saturday. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you.
Right. I hope you've had a good week so far.
Yes, we can't complain.
Okay, so far so good.
Okay.
So if you permit me, I think we can start with the vetting. This week we saw the ministers that the president had nominated appear before Parliament, asked different questions, among others. But before the vetting started proper, we saw the NDC release, a statement directing its members of Parliament not to approve these persons that the president had nominated. Let me start with you, Selom. Were you surprised to see that, that directive? And to you, what did that mean?
Well, yes and no, in the sense that in one breath, I could understand why that statement would be issued. In another breath, too, I was a bit confused. I didn't understand why that statement should be issued. I could understand why that statement was issued because obviously the NDC, as the minority in Parliament, as the biggest opposition party, will want to keep the heat on. Government is under a lot of pressure, the financial sector, a lot of things. So they want to keep that heat on, especially coming from the background where we saw in 2017 the approval of certain ministers that a lot of Ghanaians think, or a lot of Ghanaians thought shouldn't have been passed. Hawa Kumsing, the Agric minister then, finance minister himself and a few others, upon Nkrumah, etc. And the way that whole process was undertaken or carried out left so much to be desired, at least from the view of the NDC grassroots or rank and file. And if you recall, Sami Jemfi issued or wrote a scathing letter or note or whatever statement. And many have said that that statement reflected the thinking of some key persons in the party. No wonder he's not really been called before anybody or dealt with it anyway. You know, calling out the speaker and a few other people. Many people think that was a reflection of the party in most quarters. So yes, I could understand why these particular executives will quickly issue that statement to ensure that their intention was clear. They will send a clear signal to the new leadership of the party that this is what we want and this is where we want to go. The other point, or the other reason why I kind of understood why they will issue that statement is because the NDC, as they've said, have been calling for a downsizing of government, calling for reshuffle, and a few other people, civil society, etc., have been calling for reshuffle. And that reshuffle, in this sense, meant a downsizing of government and things like that. Now, you don't do that reshuffle. You now bring a new list of people.
But the new list is
obviously
to
replace other people. But that replacement, they argue, could have been done in a different way. Merge some ministries, you know, upgrade some deputy ministers so that you have a smaller team now. Now you replace them with new people. And, you know, when you look at the net effect, you may even say that it's an expansion of government because some people have been moved to Minister of State. You know, so there could be some marginal expansion of government there. So they are saying that they are calling for, how do you call it, a reduction in the size of government. So to be hypocritical on their part to now be seen approving, you know, the expansion of government. That is what they say. And that's why I can understand why they issued that statement. On the other side, why I cannot understand that such a statement will be issued was that it sought to prejudice the vetting process. The process hadn't happened. You know, seeking to throw the baby away with the bathwater. You don't even know whether the people who appear will be exceptional or have exceptional ideas to transform our country. So even before the vetting is carried out, you say they should not be approved. Then what's the point? So should they partake in the vetting? You say yes. So what's the point in they partaking in the vetting?
Then in the end, not
to quiz the people, expose them, and even no matter how well they perform, you will still not approve them. It didn't really sit well with him, but of course that's what they did. And I also think that this somewhat could be a reflection also of the generality of what the people of Ghana think. We have what we call a hung parliament. Others have said it's not. But generally, what we've seen as a very close parliament. Many have said that we've not really seen the benefit of that parliament. Of course, CDD recently said that the parliament was living up to expectation, given how they were able to disapprove the allocation of funds to National Cathedral and some other things. But many people think that the scrutiny that this parliament promised by the nature of its numbers, we are not really seeing. And so, yes, I can understand it in that context. So really, I would have thought that they would have waited, or they should have waited for the vetting to be done. Then maybe you can come and say, we've seen the vetting, we've seen the answers the ministers have given, there's nothing new. We don't think that we need to burden the taxpayers again with these numbers. The government should do A, B, C. Our people in parliament will not, you know, be party to this. We will not approve of them. You know, so that in people's minds would have appeared that you would have given them the opportunity to at least be heard. But even before the people are heard, you've condemned them. They should not be approved. I found that quite...
okay. Well, we'll come to the vetting proper and whether you were okay with some of the answers and the way some of the nominees behaved. But Richard, what's the point in telling us that you have no intentions to approve these persons and waste your time and everybody's time by attending the vetting, asking questions, and in our mind, we know what you're going to do, not approve them anyway?
I think it was a complete waste of our time. That statement ought not have been issued, because it sought to undermine the authority of the leadership of the current minority. Yes, if you look at the provisions of the Constitution, Article 55 thereabout, you deal with what political parties really are and what they mean for our democracy. One of the authorities they do have is not to direct members of parliament as to how they vote. Members of parliament have been elected by members of the Ghanaian public with the authority to take part in elections, i.e. vote in national elections. And those people may be NDC or NPP, CPP, or non-aligned. Yet, by reason of their citizenship of Ghana, and by reason of the fact that they are over 18 years of age, they have been given the mandate as part of the things they enjoy as citizens to vote for their members of parliament. So when they vote, the expectation is that when members of parliament go to parliament, they will do what, with the greatest respect, is in their interest. So when someone is sitting in, Bimbilla and votes for a member of parliament, and the member of parliament comes to Accra, the expectation is that the best interest of that person will be served in parliament. The idea that some unelected people who basically have been elected by a small group of political people within their party to lead the affairs of their party should not provide any basis, in my view, my respectful view, for them to be directing how members of parliament vote in parliament.
They also play a role in getting them into parliament, no, as a party.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It is your ticket which serves the purpose of ferrying that person to parliament. That person could have, stood on on an independent ticket. Yes, it's great because the Constitution says that political parties should help deepen the ideas that we use in governing our country. That is the position. But I do not think that the framers of the Constitution intended to have a leadership in Parliament that is remote controlled by, a few groups of people who have been elected by their own members, not the generality of Ghanaians. The point I'm making is that I do not think it's in the interest of the Honorable Minority Leader, Ato Forson, the interest of the Honorable Agoja, in the interest of the Honorable Kofi Bua, for Ghanaians to be told that they are sitting there for the NDC leadership to determine what they do and what they do not do. It is completely unacceptable. We should not encourage it. And let me make the point that this is not the first time it's happening. In fact, when the NPP side went to the presidency to complain about the finance minister, and the NDC guys in parliament dutifully filed a motion seeking to remove the minister from office, the expectation of Ghanaians was that we were going to have a bipartisan approach to this matter, i.e., the NPP and the NDC were going to agree to remove the finance minister. But for some reason, the NPP guys quickly chickened out of this whole matter.
But isn't that the reality of our politics? That even though you're a minority in parliament or majority in parliament, you don't solely have a say in the House. We saw the party, in the case of the minority, come out with a letter saying we're bringing a new leadership, and we saw old ones kicked out.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you heard my views here, and I was very, firm and direct to the point that I thought that was completely unacceptable. So too is this directive. And the point I was making happens to be that the NDC, the MPP at the time, also issued a similar statement asking its members of parliament to stay away from the motion seeking to remove the finance minister. I think really, let us not cheapen our democracy. Bipartisan elections took place as to bring you to parliament. I'm using the word bipartisan in a very narrow sense to mean that members of the various constituencies who voted at either NDC or NPP, and they may have voted for people who were not necessarily their party candidate. So when that person comes to parliament, have we heard any of the MPs saying that I'm going back to my constituency to consult the members of my constituency as to how I should vote on this matter? None. Ideally, in a proper democracy, you should expect that, town hall meetings will be had by members of parliament. You invite the members of their community to come and share their views as to how they should go and vote, so that when they return to Accra, that is how their views are formed. But you are sitting in Accra, and a few groups of people are sitting in, Adabraka, and they are directing how a particular, leadership in parliament should vote. I think it's completely unacceptable. Again, on the matter of the fact that they came and they are taking part in the vetting process, and yet they will not go and vote on the floor. I mean, what does that even mean? In other words, when you hate the what do you call it? Let me use the raffia. You should also hate the mat, because if you don't want to be a part of the process, then don't go anywhere near it. But here you have, oh, we are not going to take part in the voting process. Yet you are asking questions of these people. I think it is completely unfair. And if you look at Article 296 of the Constitution, it talks about discretionary power. And I would stretch the provision in this Constitution to say that the MPs who are going to abide by the directive of the NDC would seem to be in breach of this. Because clearly, the authority they have to decide who gets to become a member of government and who doesn't become a member of parliament is discretionary in a way.
Yeah.
And they exercise it for or against a particular candidate appearing before them. The fact that they cannot be fair and candid because of the prejudice they take to the job would seem to me, respectfully, to be in breach of that particular.
So how do we deal with it if it's indeed a breach?
Well, interesting points Kai makes, but I think it's quite utopian to say. I mean, that's what we expect really. Yeah. But in practice, that's not what happens, and that's not what will happen. We've seen in advanced democracies, in the U.S. Senate and in the House of Commons, etc., how, members of parliament, are made to stand by party positions. Yeah. So the Obamacare, for example, we saw how the Republicans were so averse to it and tried to move heaven and earth to make it not succeed. Once in a while, you find people like PCRP or Fori and co. We see them quite, a few times in the West in advanced democracies. But that doesn't derogate, from the point that the majority of the people toe a certain party line. So, for example, the NDC could have decided to tell their people this without issuing a statement, that all of you vote along this line. It doesn't really change it. What we are all expecting is that our parliament or our democracy will grow to the extent that members of parliament can take decisions independently. But when you take decisions independently, what it will also mean for the political party organization is that there will be chaos. So the political party has its agenda, has its plan, it thinks is the best for Ghana. And then now, members of parliament, for whatever reason, maybe they've consulted their people, other considerations or influences come in, and all of them or some of them decide to toe a certain line, which is different from the party position. It may bring chaos. Even though I do not really subscribe to the party coming in to exactly tell them how to vote, it is not strange and it is not peculiar to our circumstance. I think we've come from a certain historical background, and to provide some background to all of these. In 1997, for example, in the 93 Parliament, MPP didn't go to Parliament, so it was more or less an NDC Parliament with a few independents, with a few other people. So there were appointments of ministers or nominations, appointment, etc. In the 1997 Parliament, just when, so Rawlings and co thought that because the people had been approved already and he was still in power, he had won election to be the president, he would continue with some of the ministers. So he made an announcement that ministers A, B, C, D will retain their positions as ministers. And in his mind, or in the mind of the government at the time, there was nothing wrong with it because they had already been approved by a previous parliament. Their thinking was that once a parliament approves of a certain person's nomination, that is indefinite, and that the appointment did not terminate with parliament or even with the tenure of the president. So J.H. Mensah, on the day, in fact, Pepra, who was one of the retained ministers, finance minister, was to go to parliament to read the budget. On the day he was to go to parliament, he went to the Supreme Court to seek a declaration that on the true and proper interpretation of certain aspects of the Constitution, an approval before the new parliament could not be a prior approval. And in Article 70, is it 78 or so, Article 78(1) of the Constitution, we hear of what we call the prior approval. The Constitution says that before somebody could be appointed as a minister, that person must have what they call the prior approval of Parliament. So J. Mensah goes to court on this prior approval matter. He takes three things to court. One is that you cannot be approved from the previous Parliament into this Parliament. The second one is that prior approval necessarily means consideration and vetting of the persons involved. The other one, the next thing he was looking for was that according, by virtue of the prior approval, meaning consideration and vetting, all those people could not be ministers because they had not been vetted. The Supreme Court said, yes, you can, we can agree with you that you cannot be approved from one parliament and expect that approval to be
cover
the next one. So that was fine. But the Supreme Court did not agree with him on his definition of prior approval. In essence, the Supreme Court said the definition of prior approval was an ordinary, prior approval was not a term of art. It should be given the ordinary meaning, which means that Parliament on its own should determine what that prior approval should mean. If Parliament decides that, okay, we'll throw it to the Appointments Committee, they say, hey, let him go through, that could be prior approval.
Yeah.
If Parliament decides that that should mean consideration and vetting, that should be what it is. So, back and forth, now Parliament itself decided that that prior approval should mean vetting. In fact, in the case we are talking about, what they did eventually was to write back to the President to tell him that Parliament has approved these people. So that is it.
Yeah.
That approval also means prior approval. So coming from that place to a point where we are today, where we are discussing the tendency of a particular party rejecting, the nomination of, or the nomination of certain people, I think we've come quite a long way. And what we can do is to try to perfect it. It's a process. And I think over time, we will get there. We don't need to go without being conversant or taking cognizance of what the historical, issues have been. So, there's a case called J.H. Mensah and the Attorney General. In fact, in that case, what the Attorney General, Obeda Samoa, and his deputy, Martin Amidu, even said was that, why do you sue us? Or why do you sue the Attorney General? Because the Attorney General is also not the minister then. Yeah. Because he's also not been given prior approval. Yeah. Why do you see him? He came out like that's a nominal defendant, etc. So that was fine. The point I'm trying to make is that we have come a long way. We are not there yet, but we will need to appreciate the little efforts we have made whilst we task them to do better. Okay. We are not very happy with a lot of things, but I think that we must count the little steps we have made and see how progressive we can get.
Okay, I'll give you guys 1 minute each to wrap up. I need to take a quick break.
On the vetting itself or something?
On the sky, hold your ammunition. I have to take a quick break. This is what the papers are saying. My name is Vivian Kai Loko. I'm here with Richard Sky as well as Selim Adonu. We'll be right back to wrap up on the vetting and issues around it for this week. Stay with me.
Get 2 months of Showmax for the price of one. It's giving double energy. It's giving celebration Ankasa. All that scandal. It's giving the perfect storm. Shishi. More epic thrills and detective vibes. You go feel, sir. It's giving what it's supposed to be giving and overdose. So subscribe now to get 2 months for only 16 Ghana cedis 99 pesos for a limited time. It's giving Showmax.
And welcome back to what the papers are saying. My name is Vivian Kai Loko. I'm here with Selim Adonu as well as Richard Sky. We're looking at the big stories for the week. Currently on discussion is to do with the vetting and issues raised by the minority. Sky, I'll pick your closing comments on this whole thing. And what do you think the way forward should be on this matter?
Well, let me just make just a few quick comments. So I appreciate the point that Selim makes on what happens in democracies elsewhere. But I disagree with the view that you have political parties elsewhere directing members of Congress or members of Parliament in the UK, as the case may be, on how they should vote. Of course, there is something known as the institution of the whip in Parliament, in the UK Parliament. Their job is to work to whip members of their political party in line on what the vote is, what the position is. But that doesn't mean that they reserve the authority to direct that if you do not do this, A, B, C, D will happen to you. Of course, if you look at Eskime, which is the absolute authority on parliamentary democracy, the position of the chief whip will be that do A, B, C, D. The chief whip seeks to enforce that. A member of parliament is entitled, by reason of the representation that he does in parliament, to pull away from the party position. And where the party feels that, okay, you have done this and it harms our interests, they can remove. The term is you remove or you take the whip away. What it means is that you are no longer covered in Parliament. That doesn't mean that you are thrown out of Parliament. You understand? But then, in some cases, the whip is restored. The point I'm trying to make is that political parties are political parties. Yes, they shape the agenda of their own, institutions or their own group, and then also seek to shape the agenda of the nation. But that is not to be misunderstood to mean that they reserve the right to direct a person elected by NDC, MPP people acting together from their constituencies on how they should vote. That undermines democracy, because they are not there to represent the interests of the NDC. They are there to represent the good people of Ketu South constituency, the Boku constituency, the Elembele constituency. These are the people who have sent them to Parliament to represent their interests. So it cannot be that willy-nilly their view should not matter, and that it is the political party that sponsored them that should prevail. It is completely, in disagreement with what representational democracy is all about. That having been said, I think that there's a case to be made that yes, you want a certain direction provided for this country. This government clearly has failed in terms of delivering on its major promises that it made to Ghanaians. Is there a need for government to reduce its size? Yes. The president has to do that because the Constitution says that he determines how many people should form part of his government. Yeah. But as the argument has been made, even on the City Breakfast Show this morning, 19 ministers, they are supposed to form the cabinet. Yeah. Now, as Kobene Jepon rightly said, his thinking is that the framers of the Constitution intended to have, not more than 19 ministers. But the same Constitution tells us that the president reserves the right to appoint as many ministers as he believes are necessary to run the government. So the question is whether in the current situation we find ourselves, in all the circumstances of this government, they should continue the way they are doing. I say that the size of government is too large, they are failing to deliver on their mandate, there is no justification to maintain the numbers, and therefore there has got to be a reshuffle as to cut down the numbers. There has to be merger of ministries, there has to be, realignment of ministries as to take the number down. But should that mean that when that is not done, the minority side should say that they are not voting?
But how else can they protest and force the president or government to push the numbers down in this case? How else can they protest or trigger an action that will force the president, or in this case, government, to reduce the numbers?
Okay, so we approve budgets every year, right? The government comes with a budget and says that this is what we want to do for a particular year. If the minority is so minded, they can refuse to pass a budget. They can refuse to do that, which is to force the government, because the argument is that we have too many people hanging on in government and they are doing basically nothing. So if you say that the Ministry of Chieftaincy is no longer useful and you don't want someone occupying that office, you make that point and you hold that particular budget.
Spending.
Yeah, and you tell the president that, well, let's have some trade. It happens in other democracies where they say that defund this institution, defund that institution. If you do not defund, we are not going to support.
So you want them to target the spending part to force people out?
Exactly, because the point is, at this point, the people are coming into government. If they are coming into government, the president reserves the right to say that, okay, these people, now that they have been approved, I think that I want to condense the ministries, that I want to collapse some ministries and merge them. We are not there yet. And then you say that Advocate Yaman is not going to, we are not passing, Nanta will not pass him because the party says that you should not do it. I think go to the mandate that you have as a member of parliament with a fair and open mind, as required of you by Article 296. Do the job, go in there, and if you have to vote, vote. If you have to abstain, say so, because you are entitled under the Constitution to even abstain, when it comes to certain matters. Okay. But the idea that ab initio, from the very go, you say that no, you are going to ask questions, but you will not go and vote on the matter. I think it's a great disservice to the good people of Ghana, and nobody should encourage that. Okay,
we'll stay with the NDC.
Just to
so you have only 1 minute.
Just to conclude on this, the interesting thing in this is that the vote will be secret, right? Article 104 says that votes of this nature should be secret ballots. And when it's a secret ballot, anything can happen. So despite the, should I call it, edit of fiat issued by the party that do not vote or do not approve of these people, I mean, we could have anything happening. And the other part too is that, given how a lot of the MPP MPs themselves have not been happy with their government, with the Kenofurata matter and all of that, and how they think their government is performing, not doing well to their expectation, we could have an interesting situation on our hands. Once it's a secret ballot, we could have a lot of those people protesting, by not approving or voting against the approval of some ministers, and you never know who did that. So if the NDC guys are resolute and block, they vote against them, which are down, because some of them have personal relationships beyond party. Some of them are related in many ways. So once it is secret ballot, you will never know what will happen. But I'm sure that given the difficulties the MPP MPs have gone through with Kenofurata and the president and all of that, quite a number of them may vote against, some of the candidates. It will be interesting to see. And we really want to see how that will pan out. Okay.
We'll still stay with the NDC and indeed the minority. We've seen former President Mahama. Yeah. We were going to the picking up of the forms for the presidential race. We've seen the minority endorsing that Mahama should go. We've seen Greater Accra Regional Chairman endorsing. We've seen some other people's endorsing, some associations endorsing. Dufour got people to pick his form today. Yesterday, Kojo Bonsu, the same. And then a fourth person has picked. So far, we have 4 people who have expressed interest to run. Let's start with the endorsement coming for ex-President Mahama and the rules around that.
First of all, you see, traditionally, what has happened has been that before these things are opened, the parties would issue guidelines, which guidelines in effect seek to compel party leaders, people in executive positions within the party, to live lives that are, exemplary. You understand? Because you are in a way going to superintend over the process, regardless of how you look at it. So you should not be seen to be jumping into the arena of conflict or the race, as to give the impression that from the get-go or the word go, you are already aligned to one side. A particular person. Now, I know that my good friend, Mr. Segbefia, who is Alex Segbefia, former Chief of Staff Deputy, and then also a former Minister for Health, played some role in the NDC election process and all of that. But I've been trying to get a copy of the guidelines, if indeed it was issued. I've not seen it yet. But it is very troubling that you have party chiefs, executives, regional chairmen, all of them announcing that they support President John Dramani Mahama. Of course, it is a foregone conclusion, unless you are coming from Pluto and you don't know what's happening in Ghana, that John Dramani Mahama will be elected the candidate of the NDC. There is...
No, why bother and not hide?
But you see, fairness must not only be preached, but it must be seen to be done. Because if you are a party executive and you are the people who are releasing the forms, you are the people in the various constituencies who will be superintending over the process. You are the people who will be looking at the voters register to say that, oh yes, this person's name is there or not there. If you are already jumping from radio station to radio station, suggesting that yes, all the people of this region there, they are supporting a particular candidate, I think it is unfair. There is a reason why people have got to be fair to the process. Because when you do that and the former president wins, everybody will say that, oh, the level playing field has been created. Imagine if Jean Mensa, who is the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, before a national election, comes out to say that, oh, I support John Dramani Mahama, or I support Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. What would the NDC people be saying? Or what would the MPP people be saying? I think that, look, principles are principles. You either like something or you do not like it. Or you either believe in something or you do not believe in it. The fact that you believe that John Dramani Mahama should seek re-election should not mean that you should not do your duty as a person in the NDC holding an executive position. I think it is embarrassing, it is not right, and it undermines the whole principle of fairness, which should guide what they do.
Okay. Salom.
Well, I mean, I don't depart really from Sky's position. I'm a person of principle. I think the principle should remain. And for me, seeing party executives and party bigwigs openly declaring support for candidates when they are key players in the process is not appropriate. It actually speaks to the falling standards in ethical conduct as far as these things are concerned. I recall in the election that elected John Mills as the running mate, the flag bearer of the NDC, Mahama Yariga held a position in Parliament. He was ranking member on the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee also. But once he decided to become the spokesperson of Mills, he resigned that position. That was principle. And maybe at the time, principle was principle. I don't know. And it's across the political divide. In fact, I made this comment when we covered the NDC Congress at the Accra Sports Stadium, where you saw speaker after speaker, and not just everybody or anybody spoke at that program. Those people who spoke were key people, regional chairman, key persons. Regional chairman was addressing Congress, and he was in a GM Twasu cap. What did that mean to the other people like Dufour and Kojo Bonsu and who were there?
But initially they had called for, him just to go and just an endorsement.
But it's not proper for a regional chair, for example, to appear to address Congress. And that was the biggest stage ever in his life, I think. The whole party's eye fixed there, and the whole country's eye fixed there. You appear with the GM Twasu cap to speak. And I mean, some of the things you said, show that you were, more or less endorsing GM. That was not proper. And we saw it across the board. All right. And now we have regional chairmen coming together to pick a form for John Mahama, in essence saying that they support him. He should be the one to go. It is not appropriate. It is not correct. Now we had Dufour also got
the Ashanti Regional Women's
Organization
also
it's not correct. They will end up destroying the party. Their only escape route now will be that there's not so much contest or competition. So it's a lopsided competition from the word go. So you cannot have a sharp division between Dufour people and GM people. The Dufour people themselves and the Kojo Bonsu people themselves know what the outcome will be. Dufour himself and Kojo Bonsu and Co themselves know what the outcome will be. But running for political office, I mean, you don't necessarily have to win. People run for office for various reasons. You may want to further your business interests, you may want to be popular, you may want to place yourself in a good position so that in case the party comes to power, they know you're a leading member. You know you will not win. In fact, Dufour himself, I know he tells himself that if he makes 10%, he would have done well. But he will hardly make 10%. John Mahama is the overwhelming favorite of the NDC people. Everybody knows that. And there should be some activity in the party. I'm for competition. JM should not be made to think that he can just go through like that. He must face competition. The competition will energize the base of the party. They will all travel around the country, talk to the people, do one or two things, will want to develop things in the constituencies, etc. That will help the party base. That will help them. That will ginger the base up, and that is good for the party. The activism, the activity that will come will be good for the party in the end. So competition is good, but they must, be careful they don't run the party aground by this. Indeed, I said this across the board. So we saw recently, not recently, I mean, we've seen the recent comments of the majority chief, for example. He's obviously for Baumia, and we see him, spar with other people on the Alan side. That's a majority chief whip.
So we're seeing it across the board.
It's a breakdown
and what's
of discipline.
Leading to
and
this
the president himself,
erosion of
the
ethics.
president himself was in Eugene Ahim's constituency. Where he went to, he was reading the speech, got to a point and said the guy will run for office in the area, so they should look upon him favorably. It is a total breakdown of discipline. So the party was preaching, don't declare support, don't support anybody openly if you are the secretary of the party. But the boss of the party himself, in a written speech, not that he was just talking, in a prepared speech, meaning that, they thought about it and wrote it. He went through, saw it was right and proper. He read it to the people. Nobody came. I mean, the party, everybody shied away from condemning it. It is a breakdown of discipline and principle. It is across the board. And you see, that breakdown of discipline and ethical conduct is what we see everywhere. So if a chief executive is doing it, an MC is doing it, do you have the moral courage to stop the thing? You cannot. No. And it cuts across in every facet of our lives. That is, a breakdown of order in society. That's how I see it.
Okay, we'll take a quick break again. When we come back, we'll look at the shortage of vaccines across the country. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's City on the Go. You don't have to miss any of your favorite television and radio shows on City TV and City FM. Enjoy thrilling content from your world of great television and relevant radio at your convenience. Subscribe to CityTube on YouTube, turn on your notification button and receive prompts on our live streaming sessions and new content uploads. For easy access to the CityTube page, scan the QR code on your screens, subscribe to the CityTube page, and voila! Unlimited content awaits you. Don't forget to subscribe to CityTube for amazing content from City TV and City FM.
So welcome back to what the papers are saying. We're about wrapping up. We'll wrap up with the issue to do with shortage of vaccines across the country. And indeed, we're told that most public health facilities are struggling to get these vaccines for children, mothers who have brought their children for vaccination. Let me start with you, Richard Sky. We were thinking that this issue of shortage of vaccines in 2023 should really not be something we should be experiencing as a country, especially with the inroads we've made with regards to vaccination.
Yes, I mean, it undermines all the work that, people years before us had done, encouraging women, men to allow their children to go out there and get vaccinated against the killer diseases that actually claim them, often when they are young. And so it is really disappointing that you have in office today a government that promised to make things better for Ghanaians. And for the very first time in a long time, today we're speaking to the Ghana Health Service chief, and he was saying that, he's not seen this, before or in recent history. And the blame is that, our city was doing poorly against the dollar. And so if you want to import, these drugs or vaccines into the system, we did not have enough resources to do it. So again, when economy is mismanaged the way it has been done, these are some of the fallouts you see. People don't get food to eat in the schools, even when you promise that you are going to supply them food. The roads don't get built because, there's no money to fix the roads. People go to hospital, they can't receive the care that they need because there's no money to ensure that people get well. These are the symptoms of an economy in trouble. And it is so unfortunate that the NPP that promised to transform the lives of Ghanaians is the party that is pretending over this level of decay. And it's completely disappointing and unacceptable. And Ghanaians would have to decide what they do with this government going forward. But the point has to be made that if you look at it, when the COVID thing happened, the expectation of people like us was that we were going to use it as an opportunity to create local, competence, capacity, and the know-how to be able to do some of these things. Of course, nobody should tell me that we do not have Ghanaians in high offices, in big pharma, elsewhere, doing so well, who we can lean on, bring them back home to come and help us make this happen. I was so happy when the president said that they were thinking in that direction. Because at the time, I was doing, my LLM in international trade and maritime law. And one of the key components of what I did was to examine the AFTA, which is the project we have now across the whole continent of 1.3 billion people or so. And one of the big problems that we have in Africa is that we do not have enough capacity to produce vaccines and drugs generally. So we are importing close to 80% or so of some of the essential drugs and vaccines that we need in the country. And one of the academic papers I wrote, I made the argument that, look, you know, this whole big pharma thing is regulated by the TRIPS agreement, which is basically an intellectual property instrument protecting people's patented drugs and vaccines. In other words, you cannot go and take you know, a drug produced by, you know, this particular institution and then just start producing it. You need the authority of the patent holder, or you need to import from that person. But you see, this was creating a problem because low-income countries like us cannot be competing with these big countries, Western countries, to get, you know, into the same market and get drugs from them. So the idea came that why not let us do something about the TRIPS agreement. So Doha Declaration came to be the cure for this problem, where there is some allowance, where a country determines that, look, there's a public health emergency, in which case we saw with the COVID thing. It should be possible for you to issue licenses that make it possible for such vaccines or drugs to be produced locally. The instrument is there, but for some reason, we are unable to engage it because of history. When Brazil came under fire from HIV/AIDS, they had to rely on it because people were dying. But of course, there was a pushback. Again, if you go to South Africa, they tried it. They passed a law seeking to take advantage of it. The big pharma folks sued them, and it took a lot of effort to eventually get this thing out of the way. The point I'm making is that the regime is there. If Ghana is willing, we should create the factories here, use the Doha Declaration provisions that apply to, you know, public health emergency situations, and then activate the process of
producing. Can we afford it? This is capital intensive.
We have money for all kinds of frivolous things. There are all kinds of things we are doing that do not matter. These are the lives of our citizens. We are talking about these. I think that if we do it, it will serve our interest in the long term because technology transfer and all kinds of things happen in the process. Otherwise, we may then have to go into some negotiation with the patent holders and see how they can help us serve as the base for supplying the whole of Africa with vaccines which are critical for our survival.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we are just not serious. That's what it means. We are just not a serious country. You know, to have you run out of vaccines. Vaccines are very important too. Very, very important. You know, I recall when I gave birth to one of my girls, they said, I mean, that facility didn't have what they call a BCG. And they made me understand that the BCG was so important that you had to take it. You know, so I was moving around, and whilst I was moving around, I was afraid because the way they explained the thing, anything could happen because at that level, the baby did not have any cover or any covering. And we knew all of this, and we hear as part of the vaccines, you know that we don't have now, is a BCG and a whole lot of things. Scott talked about the factory, that's super, and the president talks about vaccine history and all of that. That's great, but that's big talk. Okay, we've not done the simple things, but we always believe in Ghana. You know, big. You know, we want to do the big things, but the basis and the fundamentals are not there. We did not have factories 10, 20 years ago which produced vaccines in Ghana, but we had vaccines. So it means that there was a certain value chain that was working, a certain procurement process, a certain process was in place that was working. What has happened to that process? What has happened to our surveillance system? How do we pick signals? Did they have to take the graphic to put this on this front page before Parliament, the people's representatives, will quickly write to the minister or the institutions under the ministry to appear before them on Tuesday? We are not serious. Representatives of the people, when you go to your constituencies, what do you hear? What do your people tell you? Your district directors of health, what do you hear? We are not serious. You understand? So it is, our priorities are wrong.
To them, it came to their attention.
Oh, it came to their attention and they kept quiet.
It came to their attention. Now they have acted.
No, wait. It came to their attention
is why
the graphic reports. They should be picking intelligence first. They should be picking intelligence.
Because this shortage has been happening
and it's been happening from last year, February.
Yeah.
In some cases, I mean, people said May, June.
Yeah.
Others said February. And we have the representatives of the people. We have a government. We have a Minister of Health who is at post. And all the institutions under him. The immunization people, the Ghana Health Service has a public director of public health, director of public health. And you don't have vaccines. 6 childhood killer diseases we learned in primary school. Poliomyelitis. And over 10 years ago, I mean, Ghana was polio free. Just 2 years ago, we started recording cases of polio. That should set a serious government in motion. That we must do something to arrest it. Rather, we don't have vaccines this time.
We don't have money.
Money for what?
Money to import.
No, but we have money and wanted to break the conference center and rebuild it. We don't have our priorities are upside down.
Exactly what I was saying.
The priorities are off, so we are not serious. Anybody whose priorities are upside down, that person is not serious. And if Ghana were a human being, if Ghana were a human being and you met him on the street, what would you tell him? The priorities are upside down. We are not serious. We take pride in, I think we pamper ourselves. We take pride in vain glories. Ghana is the first country south of Sahara to do this. We are the first country to fly drones. You're the biggest country to fly drones. The first country to do this, to do that, to do that. Meanwhile, the countries we do not see are low-key running and overtaking us. Look at even in football circles. So when Ghana, won 4 AFCONs, none of the people who are beating us today came close. The last time we won it was in 1982. I don't know where you were, Sky. 1982. Now, Egypt and co have passed that, and they've won more. When we won 4, we were not close. Cameroon wasn't close. All of these guys went, but we still think we are a football nation. And we still pride ourselves in the fact that we won 4. You understand? So, we are just not, every aspect of our society doesn't appear to be getting it right. And for it to percolate to health, to something like vaccines for children, I think is the worst and the lowest level we can ever get to. What it will mean is that in the next few years, we'll begin to see the effects of these. Polio cases will go up, diphtheria cases will go up, a lot of things. And that will not be good for us.
We actually hope it doesn't get.
We hope
pray
so.
and hope.
Well, that's what we do.
We need to issue the compulsory licenses to make it possible to produce the generic ones here.
The production is good,
have to
but until we produce,
we-
let's
we-
get it how we've been
we
getting
need
it
to
in the
back-
past.
Yeah, that's right. We need to get the money.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. And we hope for the best and not the worst. Stella Madonu, thank you very much. Richard Sky, thank you very much. My name is Vivian Kai Loco. And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Goodbye.